The Metaverse is emerging as the next big technology platform, attracting developers, designers, marketers, social networks, and loads of investments. And sure, there's a lot to explore in this space, but there's also lots of substance, insight, development, and exciting trends. Curated by two Metaverse futurists, Adi and Tazar, this podcast series brings on Web3 specialists from around the globe who break down the biggest developments and bring on the most interesting insights for our collective future. You will now be entering a Metaverse experience. Welcome to the Metacast.
Welcome back to the Metacast with Adi and Tazza, and we have a special guest today. We have Chris Guerin, founder and CEO of Xpllore. Chris, thank you for joining us.
No, thanks for having us, guys.
Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience and your background?
Well, got quite a bit of experience, as you'll guess, through possibly my age, but probably started out as a CGI artist, actually. So I'm a content creator originally, and wow, yeah, that was back late 90s, early 2000s when even the first Toy Story had only just come out. So there's my age showing there. But by seeing the way things like that were developing and people starting to use CGI, I started to work at Rolls-Royce creating content for jet engine training. So quite a different type of subject matter, but it brings itself back into the loop of where I've ended up. But yeah, 10, 11 years as a CGI artist, creating everything from how a jet engine works right through to sort of things like nuclear energy and things that a lot of people think of Rolls-Royce as being the automotive and the motor cars, but actually the real Rolls-Royce, the true company is jet engines, and the cars have always come second to that. What was going to be a few years sort of short stint of a career there and then move on, I ended up there for 11 years. And then from there, I decided I wanted to step out on my own. I'd created, I think, every jet engine Rolls-Royce had ever created. One of the leading projects was the Eurofighter jet engine. So, quite prestigious projects in my 20s. And set up my own company, Short CGI, in 2008, creating, sort of the same kind of content again. But mainly for, a bit more of a broader spectrum, really. Still working for Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace and BA Systems and companies like that. But also things like, different subjects, things like construction, and all those types of things, products, right through to Bentley motor cars, which was a similar nature, and kept creating content for car configurators. And then fast forward 10 years after that, now ended up where we're onto content delivery, and that's where the VR and AR comes into its own, really.
Wicked.
Amazing.
What?
I mean,
Chris, go ahead, Adi.
Yeah. I was just asking. I mean, of course, you have been in the space for so long, redefining how the metaverse is evolving. You've been with brands, of course, your experience with Rolls-Royce, and I think with how it's been with us, for having speakers like you, it's like it's coming from a point where we understand the brief history of the future, and of course you have a lovely setup back there. It's amazing, we're just seeing it, like just stirring right now at the setup at the same time. But Chris, I wanted to understand from you, what is the metaverse? Because you're been there for how do you define the metaverse in terms of what your experience has been in this field?
Yeah, I think because it's a new terminology for what I'd say for the general public. As we know, probably 9 out of 10 people have heard the phrase metaverse now, but don't actually know what it means. And it's only really come to light as a phrase for the general public since probably Meta last October, November. So we're pretty much now 12 months into this. The word metaverse for me, I'd only heard of it even only 5 years ago myself. We actually ran some events called Meta Labs, probably 2016 and 17. And even then, it's, from my understanding, it was a phrase coined way back in, I think, the 70s, early 80s, even before my time, probably from a sci-fi book, I think, from my knowledge. But for me, what the metaverse is on a really simplistic term is really, it's a three-dimensional internet. There is the phrase Web 3.0, and it's a part of that. And all I, simplistic terms is, at the moment, we're all used to, we were used to sort of like going onto the web pages and finding things. Then we started to interact with web pages, and that's where social media came along, and everything from Facebook to Twitter and everything else became more interactive in Web 2. And then obviously a lot more online shopping. Where I think this Web 3 and the Metaverse is coming about, it's just going to allow us to get into the screen and move about. And I don't think it is just about headsets, even though the way I describe it, if you watch a film at the cinema, that is the best experience, as we all know, but it doesn't stop you sitting on a plane and watching the same film on your mobile phone. It's the same with the Metaverse. I think people will need to be able to get into the Metaverse in different ways, but I think there'll be different experiences from different devices. But I think what it'll do is it'll sit nicely between what we're currently doing now. So you guys are sat in a virtual space, I'm sat in video, and what you've got is, if we were all three of us just in video, we wouldn't be able to interact and pass things. But at the moment, you guys probably can pick up something in your space and pass that along, or interact and jump between the spaces. So where the metaverse really sits nicely between this 2D static video that you're seeing with me, and then what is essentially the real world. And I think now, since the last few years and the way we've all evolved in using this technology, I think it's made us all realise that we all really now can do this technology. That all three of us are in different locations, and that's amazing, because this might have taken months to come about. But what I would say is, we still want to have the real world. It's great. I ran a workshop last week about this kind of new technology, and it's great to actually be around people, showing them the headsets and various things. But we do need that in between, of where we want a virtual space where we don't need to jump on planes, trains, and go to places, and just interact in a different way. And that's where, for me, I see the metaverse is.
I mean, exactly. I think it's one of the things where, as you rightly mentioned, Chris, it's like, as of now, this is a conversation that has happened for so long. It's like, how could we possibly be in a space together? I think sometimes when we share about our podcast as well with more people, when we have sessions like these, it's the biggest amount of curiosity is the fact that the level of connect and the level of interaction and us being able to shake hands. We were in Meet and VR a couple of days back, and we were able to actually shake hands. Trust me, Chris, Taza and I have never met in real life as of now. We've been doing podcasts for like 2 months. We've never met, but that becomes a possibility, and I think that's where onboarding of the metaverse is really important, and the experience itself is really important. Thank you so much for that answer. It's a really different perspective that I've seen from the previous session itself.
Honestly,
to add to that, I mean, I heard a story only a couple of weeks ago where somebody, just like yourselves, had not met colleagues in 2 years. Some had not met any of them because they were new starters or had never met them at all. And they'd gone into a virtual space like you guys are in right now, had a meeting. You could say, in theory, it wasn't anything different than a Teams meeting, a static Teams meeting. But they wanted to port into another room where another meeting was happening. So they went into the hallway, to go to the next meeting in this virtual space, and saw a colleague, and had a bit of a, as the Americans say, a water cooler moment, where they were passing them in the corridor, stopped, spoke to each other because they'd seen each other's avatars with their names above it, had a great meeting. By the time they'd left, said, it's been brilliant, finally get to meet up in real space. Came out of the virtual space and realised they hadn't just met each other. It was actually, in theory, no different than meeting in Teams. But that next level of interaction and immersiveness made them feel connected more. So oddly, there was no difference in the theory, the technology. They were still using the internet and a device to speak to each other. But just that level of feeling they were in a virtual space together just made them feel a lot more interactive than they had done for 2 years on Teams.
No, I agree, Chris and Adi. Whenever I walk away from these podcast sessions, I actually feel like I was there. He's halfway. He's across the world right now, and I'm on the other side of the coin. But these sessions feel there's a level of immersion that you can't get with any sort of Web2 product, whether that's Teams, whether that's Zoom, whether that's even anything, any sort of platform. Chris, I'm curious to understand. You've seen the development of the VR space over the years. Where are we right now, in its growth, and I guess what sort of challenges do you see that are yet to be overcome?
Yeah, no, it's an important one because I think over the last, there's been various stages of VR. You could, really show my age. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was these big VR pods that they introduced into big arcades, and you had these crazy headsets, and people thought that was the start of VR. And then nothing really took off because the technology just wasn't there. And it's taken till about 2015, 2016 for things to really take off bigger. Now, VR's been around in some of these engineering companies that I've worked in. They're in these cave systems, but these cave systems were £500,000 to £1 million, and they required little dots, little sensors, prongs off your headsets, and they were only suitable really for that high-end defence industry and things like that. What's made this new wave? You can see how many headsets I've got above me and at the side of me, and what it allowed is a much cheaper access. But when it got introduced, I think 2016, I've seen some old adverts of the Rift One, and they advertised it not as a VR headset; they actually called it a gaming headset. And where I think it instantly started to fail really was because it got advertised as just a gaming product for the first few years. So developers naturally went from being games developers to what they called themselves VR developers, and they all sort of pivoted into that. All the small studios started to create. Then it was a real hard sell because it was like, actually, is it just a games product? And are people willing to step away from their 8-hour sessions on their PlayStations and Xboxes and sit in a headset? Well, the headsets were still early stages. You couldn't really sit in maximum, I'd say, 2 hours, and then you'd start getting what they say the VR sort of like that jet lag effect. And the problem is you had to be really into your product. It was tethered headsets, your HTC Vives, your Oculus Rifts. So you had to have a really good setup. So it's still really, really, really early adopter stuff. And it's only taken now where I saw the vision back 2016 and 17, where I said the headsets will get smaller, they will become mobile, but we will need an interim of the power of the performance of the computing power with the mobility of a smaller headset. And this is where I sort of started to think of our idea of what we wanted to build. But I always said it needed to get the headsets higher quality resolution, much cheaper, in the hands of general public, to really sort of push this forward. And I think where it's going now and where we're at, we sort of, we even had a micro PC to develop our cloud platform as an in-between to plug a tethered headset in, because we didn't have the Oculus Quest 1 at the time. Now we've got the Quest 2, and obviously you've got the HTC Vive Focus 3, Neo, Neo 3, or 4 even now actually, Pico, and various headsets like that, and now the new Meta Pro. Those headsets are great, but they are still limited. They're limited by really mobile phone technology. So where does that leave us at this point? And without it being a plug for what we're developing and everything else, to me, the way the headsets are going to get smaller is by reducing the need for the computing power in the headset and putting that all into the cloud. So that means then you can expand the computing power in the cloud, reduce the size of the headset to the point of, they won't be much bigger than some of the AR glasses that are on the market today. And I see, really, for me, that is the next 5 years, is getting the headset smaller, utilizing 5G for the computing power or high-speed Wi-Fi 6E, and then being able to deliver the content from the cloud to the headset so that the headsets don't need to be as big as the ones that you can see behind me. And I think that is where the perfect hybrid of PC power with the headset power.
So,
that
Chris,
absolutely
yeah,
makes sense. So please go ahead.
I was going to say, Chris, from what I gathered, all these emerging technologies are critical for the development of virtual reality, whether that's, like you said, potentially 5G, cloud computing, and all these other emerging technologies. Each one have a key crucial role in making VR this sort of vision that I guess Mark Zuckerberg is aspiring for its Oculus Quest.
No, definitely, yeah. And I think that's where everybody thinks one thing is the key thing. For years everyone's saying which one's going to win, VR or AR. Neither, because they're both different. Now, yes, they may amalgamate, as we've seen with the new Meta Pro. There's mixed reality in there, and I've always said the most perfect headset will be the option to be able to have virtual when you want to be in isolation and either doing something on your own or in a virtual environment. But then there's cases where I really do love mixed reality and playing around where there are people in the same space, but there's holographic projections in front of you. So I think nothing's about the content. The good thing is the content's being developed, and I don't see the content. Even if you developed something as a developer 3 or 4 years ago, that is obsolete. That content keeps going for a few more years. I think when it comes to the headsets are only going to get better, smaller, and that's when really we'll use different headsets for different tasks. Do I see everybody sat in them for 8 hours? I don't see at this point in time. I think just like we've all got tools, if you think now, the likelihood is I could guess that right in my office, I've got a workstation right sat next to me, old school, big workstation with monitors right behind. I'm on a MacBook now. I have a phone next to me. I have a tablet there, and I've got VR headsets. And each one of those devices, for me, will all do a different job. And when they first brought the iPad out, I was like, what's the point of the iPad? I'm buying the same device, just bigger than my iPhone. But then you find yourself using these things in different ways for different tasks. And that's what will happen with all the different devices. And I think VR will just be, we'll pop that on, we'll jump in a virtual environment, discuss maybe something in a design brief, whether it's architectural, engineering, you'll pop that down, carry on some sort of normal desktop device. I think it's all there. It's the old school way of saying when radio came out, books didn't come obsolete, and when television came out, radio didn't come obsolete. We just used them in different ways for what we wanted.
Very well said, Chris. Very well said. I agree.
Yeah, and definitely. And Chris, when it comes to, of course, we're talking about VR and how the evolution has come in terms of even brands entering the space right now. It's been more than a year when Facebook probably rebranded itself as Meta, and of course that brought in a big change in the industry itself. Do you think this rebranding, when it comes to the products, when it comes to what they have been talking about since the last few months, and there have been highs and lows that we've seen with Facebook, everyone's experiencing that. Do you think this rebranding is a positive move for the industry, the VR segment, the metaverse?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and not to sit on the fence. There was a massive advantage for everybody in our world. One is put it right to the forefront of people at least knowing what this is. So even a few years ago, like now, I can go into a space and I've run workshops where I've spoke to people and I've said, do you know what the phrase XR means? And still a lot of people have never heard the phrase XR. So I've explained, it's virtual and augmented reality and mixed reality, and it encompasses all of those three, maybe 360 video as well, all under there. And it gave us in the industry a single terminology for all of those, so we didn't have half a dozen letters that we all had to throw out every time we spoke about what industry we're in. Then it felt like everybody then went from using those phrases and XR to jumping in and say we're now metaverses. To me, those two feel different. I feel the metaverse is an environment, and those technologies are applications used within those environments. So there's still a differentiator, but it does give now a name to our industry, and I'm happy for that to exist as metaverses, not metaverse, because obviously, as you guys are knowing in the industry, I think people think it's one place, and it's a bit like saying, well, the internet is one place, and it is. It's a brand above everything, but all our internet sites across servers are globally under different brands, under different guises, and that's what the metaverses are. Now, coming back to Meta, was it a good move for them? Well, certainly, I think, helped us as an industry, but maybe there's been backlash from the rest of the world when it comes to Meta. But I think it's naturally when everybody's always at the top of their game of what they're doing, people naturally have Apple get completely they launch a new phone and there's always a parody of that new phone, and the youth other brands like Samsung and LG jump on those parodies, and it's a strange one, but I think Meta, it's a struggle with Meta. I think because from my point of view, the great the headset's a brilliant product. I'll probably have a thought. Are both of you two wearing? You'll be both wearing Quest 2 right now.
Yeah.
And the great headsets. There's other great headsets, but Meta's got the backing. They've spent a huge amount of money on the all of this around us, all these applications. But will they be the biggest? I don't know, and I think there's still a lot of opportunity from somebody even said to me the other week, Microsoft. But then, as of last Friday, Microsoft announced they would be working with Meta on introducing Teams in Meta and lots of other things. So it's going to be an interesting move forward. Whether they'll be the main winners out of this, they may be one of the big brands that push it forward, and others will prosper and build bigger and better things. I'm still sitting on the fence on that one a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Chris, do you think? I'm curious. Do you think Meta has the potential to monopolize this space, given the level of investment that they're putting in?
I don't think the world will allow it, and I think that's where the fear is at the moment, why they're getting backlash. I think it's one of those, because it was a shock factor, rebranding what is a huge brand name, Facebook sent out a shockwave, and I think from the diehard VR fans, for us everything was Oculus. Everybody bought into Oculus, and then Facebook as a brand bought that piece of hardware out, and gradually, obviously, those people moved out of the company. It became very much a Facebook brand, and then suddenly this new name comes in, and I think it made it sound like it was going to be monopolizing this industry. I think it's a strange one, because I don't think any company can really monopolize it. I think it's going to be something that others will come into this, and I genuinely do think Apple will come into this space at some point, because we've had insights of the last 4 years. I think they're going to be more interested in AR rather than VR, and I think they will be interested in having their own platform to distribute their own content. So I don't think they'll come into it with just a piece of hardware. I think when they build it, they'll build something to also distribute it, just like they've got obviously Apple Games and iTunes and all the other types of spaces. So I think there's still going to be some big players out there that will come into this space. And we're as a brand ourselves, we want it to be an open metaverse, because we haven't just locked into Meta hardware. We've got Pico you can utilize. You've got HTC and any device that we're all sat on now. So I think there'll be more companies like ourselves that people will get behind, because there will be a fear factor of just Meta being there. But I think I'd really like everybody to work together. I'd like developers working in Unity and Unreal and any other platform that comes about, to really leave this space open. It's a bit like saying someone owns the internet. Nobody owns the internet. I think there might have been a few players at the beginning that might have looked like they were. I don't think Meta will go down that road, because I think they will lose if they tried to force that.
Agreed. And this is one of the reasons why they're starting to collaborate and build partnerships. With recently with Microsoft, because they understand that it's not a solo journey that they can undertake, and like we just discussed, monopolize the whole space. Everyone's a key player in this space.
Definitely. And also I think it's the fact that I think in terms of critics as well, who were really on that point where they criticized Meta for whatever they were doing. I remember seeing this video which had millions of views, which said, that Microsoft Metaverse is actually going to kill Meta's Metaverse. And then 8 months later, we see an announcement by Meta and Microsoft tying up together. So I think it's like the community is getting involved in terms of refining and sharing their opinion on what they feel isn't right, and Meta is there to listen. So I mean, monopolizing is definitely a question that I still feel that it ponders my mind. But they are in that form where they want to have inclusion of more brands because they can't survive alone. They
That's
can't
true.
really create all the services alone and be like, yeah, we've got it all. They will eventually reach out to more
That's
opportunities because that's what makes it more interoperable. So yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
I think we've already seen where there was backlash of obviously original people like myself had Oculus accounts. We then got forced down the road to push that Oculus account into a Facebook account, and now they've backtracked into allowing now these Meta accounts. And as from the developer side of things, for people developing, that was a nightmare. Everybody I spoke to in the industry really loved the products of the headset, but really genuinely couldn't develop for anybody that was an enterprise or university led who needed to, they had to use side loading as an option. But when you're in a big organization like, an enterprise or university, you can't be using your own personal Facebook account.
No, it's
So
privacy issues, or it just screams privacy issues all round, Chris.
indeed, yeah, it was tying everyone's hands. So that really fell into the hands of then the likes of Pico, and I've been out to China and met the guys over there, and they were really big over in China in those areas, and they were even in sort of like that sort of customer-led focused headsets as well, and they would only allow their headsets in the UK and America as an enterprise offering, and you had to buy 5 headsets. So that was the option that you had in this country. But the problem was people still understood, when you're going to universities, they'd never heard of Pico in their world, but they'd heard of Oculus or Meta. So, and then HTC had always been the starting point when we first started out in 2016. But the problem was Meta had the backing of the money to subsidize their headsets. So HTC products, but they couldn't sell them at such a cheap, offering compared to Meta because they could subsidize it to a cost only or even a loss leader just to get the headsets out there. So it was a difficult one because in the industry it was spreading the word and spreading headsets out to the general public, but it was also hurting others who might be able to get into the industry. So we're trying to work with all of those people, but I do think they're obviously realizing now that they did shoot themselves in the foot by pushing away developers and of products that weren't always going to be in their stores, and it wasn't all about gaming. It was a massive thing that people want to utilize these things for training, education, design, communicating in different ways, and that's where I think they gradually start to realize. But it sometimes takes. I found it sometimes takes them to try their luck, put it out there, and realize the backlash, and there's a bit of back steps in this, I think.
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. Honestly, I think yeah, that's the thing. It's like we're at that point where we're expecting brands like Meta and all the other players to do massive things out there. But of course, it's gonna build up. It's gonna build up in a way where these
Sure.
experiences are more viable and more absorbing by the users. Because of course they are seeing what Web 2 has done. They're expecting the same experiences within Web 3. It's not up to the mark, even when it comes to for situations like us when we're recording on Horizon Workrooms. There are things on like what we experienced on Spatial as well. I mean, when we were doing the session on Spatial, there were opportunities for us to use the experience to create another to have a recording, and it wasn't optimum, but Workrooms does not offer that kind of a service right now, but we are
That's it.
still able to do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. All the investments are in Meta, and at this point in time, what Workroom or the Oculus Quest offer us, it's a level of service that we've not seen in other metaverse platforms, so to speak. Chris, I just had a, I had a, I had a, the metaverse is from the outside. People think of it as just a gaming platform or just a virtual reality per se, where people go out and perhaps meet friends, collaborate, etc. But it's far more than that. My question is, so what sort of industries do you think this space will touch the most and impact the most?
Well, for me, my vision was always actually, we sell ourselves as pretty much everything separate to the entertainment business, which is obviously gaming, esports, and things like that. My vision for this was really my last few years of creating content for education, training, and that type of sector. That's where I sort of had my vision back in 2017, really, where we decided that actually we were chatting to companies and saying, what, you're interested in VR, but what is the stopping gaps at the moment? And as a developer at the time, and then speaking to other developers, everybody wanted to create amazing products, but there was lack of investment. So for studios, and even now it's difficult to create an amazing idea and afford to maybe invest 50 to 100k into that idea and then go and sell it afterwards. So majority of studios usually go and speak to clients and offer their services and hope to sell that idea, or they may require an idea to be built. But the problem is everybody says, well, what's the return on investment? What's that ROI? And if you're the first product to ever develop for this particular industry, you can't go into that industry and say, well, we've already developed that for this particular business, and they've seen a footfall of this, or they've seen increase in education in this. So there's like a bit of a chicken and egg situation that's been around for the last 4 years that has really, really struggled to get developers being able to develop and sell their products. Industry like universities or big enterprise to justify to their accountants in their businesses to spend 25, 50, 100,000 on an application. But then the end users craving, because they've all got these headsets. Many years ago, everybody rushed out and bought them. They had to go on a few applications and then put them back in their store cupboard because there was nothing else to actually, enjoy that headset. So, from our point of view, that's where, my vision was, we need to get an ecosystem environment, and now we use the word metaverses, where people can basically find the content. Back in the day, if you wanted to watch a film, you would have a stack of DVDs. You would go and get your selection of DVDs, watch that, and maybe swap them with friends and watch those films. Then Netflix came along and you could rent those DVDs. And then technology allowed them to put every DVD you could imagine up into the cloud. And whatever you fancy at this moment in time, whether it's on Netflix or Prime or Apple TV, you can pretty much go into those platforms and just right now think, I want to, blast to the past, go into the 80s or the 90s or the early 2000s, watch a film from them. And that's where our vision said, well, what we need to do is we need to get app developers, whether you're, now in the back bedroom, creating a really small sample of an idea or something that might, really be able to sell to somebody, and put these applications into the cloud, allow, somebody's created something amazing, get that out there and sell it, but at the same time, get the end user to be able to find these apps, because at the moment they're all hidden in back bedrooms or small offices being developed, and no one can get access. So we can put all these things in one place. It allows university students to find, an application that might help them with their education. But even working from, back in my old days, working at a big organisation like Rolls-Royce, you might create an application in one part of the company, and the rest of the company doesn't know it exists because it would have been sat on a workstation in the corner of an office in one office in one town. And this is what it is. It's just really creating a visibility and creating the applications across any vertical. So that's aerospace, automotive, healthcare, all these verticals. And that's where I think this will really thrive. You have got retail and you've got entertainment, but I think this is where, the likes of people have said in the past, using VR in education really, really does make you actually retain that information much more than just watching it on a video or reading it in a book. And that's where I really see that the future of metaverses and VR and AR.
I mean, that's one big revelation, I would say, in terms of how things are coming up. That's what do you say?
Yeah, no, I agree. Honestly, this space is going to touch every industry that I'm sure of. sectors like the education sector area are going to benefit massively. We've had conversations. We had one with Michael Potters, who had been in the industry since 1996, the VR space, and he reiterated your message on how VR provides a much more immersive and collaborative environment for people to learn, and it's more engaging, it's more insightful, and people learn people learn much better than in a laptop, in a Zoom or Microsoft Teams format. So there's that.
I mean, to add to that, as an example of something we helped deliver 2 years ago now, there was an application built by an app developer for Coventry University and the UK, and the app itself was developed. It was thought of pre-pandemic, but it was actually to teach people how viruses attack the blood cells and various parts of the body. And this app developer managed to create the app where you could step inside the human body, see the human body, turn off body parts. It would allow a lecturer to stand inside the actual application, invite 5 or 6 students in using headsets, even more so actually watching the lesson via Teams and Zoom. And then it would allow them to see viruses flying around their heads, click on a virus, bring it towards them, even to the point you could step and put your head inside the virus. So what it not only allows you to do is digest this content in a much better way and retain it. What it does is it allows you to do something that no other platform in this world at this moment in time can allow you to do. You know, you can watch a video, you can even watch a video of a camera being placed inside a human body, but there's no other platform, no other method to step inside the human body and invite people in there to get a real feel for when you actually have a virus and you take an antibiotic. How are those two things, working together? And that is the beauty of these types of technologies. It's doing things that other platforms at this moment in time couldn't do. And that's been a huge success down there, and they've allowed other people to step into that realm, and that's where and even things like oil and gas, where there's as we all said, there's dangerous things that you don't want people doing straight away. You can really expand how many people get into these sort of subject matters.
Definitely. And also the good point is that, Michael, I mean, if I see it from a community perspective as well, someone who has experienced something like this, what you exactly mentioned, would probably share their level of immersion or their experience with the entire community, which means there's more word of mouth and there's more curiosity around people to explore what they did, right? So I think it really stems out from an education point of view on a very massive scale, and of course it is a very organized space for something like this to happen. I'm pretty hopeful, honestly. If I were to be in that place, I would say that community is influencing a very amazing practice out ahead.
The key is, people, that the metaverse is happening now, and it's been happening. We're not waiting for 5-10 years down the road for this image that we've been told of what the metaverse has to offer. Its utility and its benefits are being seen across many different industries as we speak.
No, definitely. I mean, just to reiterate how people, I think what we're doing here and going forward, we were really pleased to say that we'll announce it here. We delivered our first full subscription product to another innovation centre down in Coventry, actually, of a similar name, Xpllore, to our brand Xpllore. And the beauty of that was it's given us access. It's an innovation centre in the Midlands of the UK, and they're inviting businesses in who've got no understanding of everything across Web3, 5G, and the Metaverse and XR. And they've allowed me to actually present to these businesses. And I really wanted to do that because at this stage, we've put our streaming platform in there where businesses can come in, upload their applications or see other applications, place any of the VR headsets on, and be able to actually, stream from our cloud system in the UK directly to one of these headsets, as you can see behind me. But the beauty of that is we got access to people who are really, really brand new to this whole, none of them last week had ever been into any headsets across the board. And at the beginning, what I asked them all is, what is your perception of the metaverse? What is the perception of XR? And everybody's was really sort of, I wouldn't say negative, but really apprehensive, and really knowledge base was quite low. But then by the end of the 2-day session that I ran with them all, they all, by the end of the session, had all had a go VR headset, a HoloLens 2, and Nreal glasses that I had with me, various things. By the end of it, every one of them, because we explained the different scenarios they could use it, and we brought it to home for their businesses. So some people were technically based, some people were social media based for their companies. We managed to bring it into where it would work for them as a business. And by the end of it, we had a really, really sort of like positive feedback. And that's purely because at the moment, it seems a little bit like it's way too out there for people's visions. And I think it scares people. And it's a bit like, whenever the iPhone came out, people thought, why do I have the internet on the go? I'll do that when I need. I'll go home and use it on my laptop. Now, everybody's walking around the streets, a little bit zombified, but we're all walking around the streets, staring at phones, doing everything from banking to, and many years ago, people just didn't believe they would do that. Now, we're only in the same stage as we're at now. People will buy into this. Things like myself, I use the Sky Beta app that Sky Television's got in the UK, where you can watch the Premiership football. And that's one of the real apps that I use, because I can actually watch a live game from the best position down onto the pitch with 4 screens either side of me to watch playbacks, and you can even invite people in to join you. And these are the things that people will start to get to really buy into. And I think it's just really educating people and getting the word out there, what the user case is for them and how they'll use it.
Agreed. There's a
Definitely.
massive education curve, and Chris, we really appreciate you getting the message across and telling people the benefits of this space. I need to check that app out, by the way, the one that provides a digital overlay of the football.
Yeah.
Jesus, I would probably spend a lot of time in there just trying to breaking down, the game, the facts, the statistics, and coming to my own conclusion on where the match is heading, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's great because, like I say, it gives you the best position. I'm an older guy now. Don't get to go out to the pub with the as much as I'd like to. Don't get to go to the game. Actually, not too far away from my team, but it gives me the opportunity to feel like I could get much closer to the game by being in the virtual space. And these new additions they've added, where they've added the screens and stats and things, is a great addition, because normally if you're watching the game, even if you're there or watching on TV, you'd have your phone, maybe watching scores and results of other games that impact your team. Well, you can have all that in the same space. And I've even learned how to actually get a bottle of beer to sit underneath with a VR head and be able to still have a beer while sat in VR. So yeah, you can get around these these opportunities if you need to.
Chris, you need to show me the ropes, because that sounds literally right up my alley.
No, definitely. Well, download the app, and we'll figure out when the next game is, and we'll have a virtual meetup in one of the football games.
Let's do it, Chris. Let's do it.
Chris, I mean, that makes the best use of our VR headsets, apart from the podcast as well.
Yeah. Honestly, like just as Chris mentioned a while back, it feels like I only used 2 free apps on the Oculus Quest, and this shouldn't be the case. Yeah. I always mention to you, Adi, I'm always looking to explore the different apps that this piece of technology offers, but it's so hard because it feels like, where do I start? Where do I look? What's the best sort of app to use? What's the best quality?
It is there, and the future will also bring in the right perspective and right options for us. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Chris, it's been lovely, honestly.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the time, and when we're ready to, we've got our app being developed, that will be a bit more wider spread. We've developed our app that's going to be obviously in this facility that we're just working with. So as soon as we're ready to share with you guys can be one of the first to get access to that and dive in with us and have a look at that.
100%.
Excited.
Yeah. And of course, we'll I think once that happens, we'll also have a live session on LinkedIn to
Yeah,
discuss more about this. I mean, of course, more people need to know about these things that are coming up. Chris,
absolutely.
thank you so much. It's been amazing to have you with us today, and I think there's a very I would say a very more a different perspective altogether in terms of how we understand the metaverse and VR
That's
in
it.
particular. It's something it's amazing, and of course, I think in terms of the XR industry, there's going to be so much to explore in terms of how we all see it as people who are exploring and getting curious about the metaverse day by day. Thank you so much, Chris. It's been amazing.
No, it's been
Awesome,
great,
Chris.
thanks. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Chris. Cheers.
And guys, we'll be back with one more episode, another
Of the
episode
Metacast.
of the Metacast in the coming weeks. We have so much to bring in, and yeah, it's gonna be awesome in the coming weeks. And we're also gonna be doing LinkedIn Live, so stay tuned. Great,
Stay tuned.
thank you so much, guys. See you in a bit.
Cheers, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.